you have any comments, questions, if you're having any issues hearing us, please feel free to chat or use the question window to follow along. Also, during this webinar, we are going to be taking some poll questions, so please hang in there with us, follow along, and take time to answer the questions. A little bit more housekeeping. If you are wanting to see these materials afterwards, there will be an email coming to you tomorrow with the information about the recording, the materials, and some other things that we're going to mention here. I have a question right now from Denise saying that she lost audio. Can everyone else hear me? If you can hear me just fine, if you could please reply yes, either in the chat box or in the question mark, that would be awesome. Great, thank you everybody. Denise, it seems like maybe you just need to call back in. All right, and on that note, we're gonna get started here. So as I said, hello, my name is Miriam Kagan. I'm a senior fundraising principal here at Kimbia. I've been working with fundraising and nonprofits for well over a decade now. I started out in direct mail, moved on to online, a lot of email and event fundraising, and now I primarily focus on crowdfunding days as part of my role here at Kimbia. But today we'll be talking about some great basics of fundraising and email and donations, and how you can really learn from your program and test from your program, and why that's important. So why are we talking about working smarter here? I don't know how many of you are familiar with the growth innovation S-curve. So, you know, program, you get a great idea, it seems like it's working, it starts growing like gangbusters for you. Then there's a little bit of a plateau, the program evens out, you're probably growing at 2 to 4% a year. That's good, but not amazing. And then the next best thing turns up, and you jump curves to the new growth curve. So think about the impact that email had on direct mail when it first came. Now email is largely in that plateau part of the S curve, and folks are looking around to say, what's the next thing? However, when looking for the next thing, and at the same time when looking at your possibly plateauing growth curve and saying to yourself, how can I really maintain this program? How can I get the most I can out of it? I'm hearing that my peers' online programs are growing by double digits. Mine is only in the single digits. How do you really focus and understand what's working for you, take time to learn, take time to evolve in a strategic manner, instead of just focusing on the next shiny thing? I know that especially in the last few years, we have had a ton of things in this industry distracting us. There's been a lot of new and shiny. There's been a ton of social apps, a lot of things, folks talking about fun stuff with mobile, fun stuff with crowdfunding, and we're getting pulled in a lot of different directions. And especially with folks who might be having some success with those tactics, but are having that success in very specific instances, or because they've approached them specifically. So what I really want to focus on today is, how do we not get so distracted by the shiny that we spread ourselves too thin and don't really have a direction we're heading in and don't know what's working for us? So that, as a fundraiser or a development officer or an event officer, you're thinking to yourself, what's the next thing I should do? You should know the answer to that, or at least you should have a good plan for figuring out the answer to that. And if you don't, you're going to be stressed and tired and not seeing the results that you want to have. And your various organizational stakeholders, whether it's your board or other managers or VPs or silos, or frankly regions, if you're in a federated model, or even your supporters, are not going to be happy campers. So to win, we need to work smarter, not harder. That's what we're going to be talking about here today. And on that note, we are going to take our first poll. So take a few seconds to vote here. We're not going to spend a lot of time with these. We have a lot of polls going on. I see that a lot of folks are voting. About 30% of you have voted so far. That's awesome. Just going to give this a few seconds more, and then we'll launch into it. So what do we see here, guys? So when asked if your organization has analytics implemented on your main site properties and key pages, almost 70% of you said yes. That's amazing. That's great. That's exactly the kind of thing that we want to hear. But a couple of things. Oh my goodness, I think my PowerPoint disappeared. But a couple of things to note on this is, I know that a lot of us know that we should have Google Analytics or whatever other analytics tools that you prefer to use on your homepage. I just want to make sure, can everybody see the slide? It should say slide 1, track your visitors. Can everybody see that? If you can't see that or you can see that, could you please tell me so in the, it's still on the title slide. Oh, that's not good. How about now? Can folks see slide 1 now that should say check your visitors? Still on the title slide. All right. I think everybody should be seeing slide 1 now. Is that correct? Perfect. All right, so I think, I'm sorry, to track back to what I was talking about, I think we all know that we should have Google Analytics installed or some other tool set on our main homepage, for example. But how many folks are really looking at your analytics and saying to yourself, what else are people really looking at on my main site or my key site properties if you have multiple ones? A good example here is, what is your second or third most visited page on your site? Maybe it's a resource slide if you're, let's say, a healthcare-focused organization. Maybe it's a slide about the different types of animals you save if you're an animal-focused organization. If that takes 30% of your traffic or 40% of your secondary clicks once somebody lands on your homepage, let's make sure that you guys are tracking that as well, understanding why people are going there, and most importantly, that your key calls to actions are on that slide as well. So if one of your goals for your, let's say for this year, is to capture more of the folks that visit your website and at least get them to sign up to get your newsletter so that you can get their email and you can then promote them. It's great if you already have a sign-up box or call to action on your homepage. But do you have that on your second and third most visited pages prominently displayed, even if they're very specific to some portion of your mission? If you don't, you're losing the opportunity to capture all those folks in the place that they really want to be. So check out your analytics platform. Here we have a screenshot, just an example from Google of the way that you can track where folks are going after their first landing on your page. Analyze that, understand it, and then make sure your key call to actions, whether it's to donate, to sign up, to join an event that you have, or to become a fundraiser, are on that page. Now we have our second poll. If you could all take a look-see here and vote or let us know your answer. All right, so what do we see here, guys? When we ask you, do you base your testing program on a set of overarching goals and outcomes and design each test to impact those goals? We see that 60% of you said no. You know, that's not surprising. We see a lot of this in the industry, and this is one of the reasons we wanted to have this webinar, to kind of bring people back to the foundation of what really makes for a great program. Why is it a good thing to have some goals and to have a test, you know, a testing program that is in line with those goals? It's so that you can make progress that matters, so that you can understand what works and so that you can understand how are you going to support those goals. You know, we shouldn't be sitting in a meeting the day before an email is about to be sent saying, hey, should we be testing something? Should we be doing something? You know, what should we do tomorrow? Instead, you can say to yourself, okay, we have 4 overall strategic goals this year. The illustration below is just an example, but let's say that your 4 goals are to increase average gifts, to acquire new donors, to increase donations from conversion rate, and to convert single gift donors to sustainers. Those are all great goals to have, but how are you going to do that? And that's where the tactical support elements come in. If you outline this before you start planning tests, then you'll know, okay, I want to figure out how I can upgrade my average gift, how I can move the needle from $45 to $60. How do I do that? What are the ways that I can try to do that? Maybe I should do an ask array test. What order am I asking people to give donations in? So that way, you're having a planned and methodical way of approaching the reaching of these goals. Now, by the way, this doesn't only apply to email. This applies to any channel that you're in. You can still have these overarching goals. I just noticed that we have a quick question from Gabriella asking 40% of how many attendees do we have? Right now, Gabriella, we have 37 people on the phone call. So when folks are voting, it's 37% of them. Okay. And I think folks are saying that I'm still on the poll slide. So what I'm thinking is happening here is that somehow between the poll technology and the not poll technology, you guys aren't seeing the deck. Can you see the deck now? It should say slide 2, set goals. Somebody could just say yes. I think that what I'm going to do, since this doesn't seem to be working very well, is just go through the slides. We will be providing you a self-assessment with all of these questions that you can ask yourself as a follow-up to this presentation. So if you want to then go through the questions and evaluate your organization in terms of how this is working for you, then that should work as well. Hey, Marianne from Kimbia, can you unmute yourself and just let me know if you're still seeing the poll or a slide that says 2 set goals?
I am still seeing the poll.
I don't know why that is, because I see the slide. Maybe I didn't close the poll. I apologize, folks. This isn't, the poll is a little bit tricky for me to.
There you go.
Okay.
Well, yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and thank you for your patience, folks. I am not the best technology user, apparently. All right, so the next item is it takes a village. We can all have awesome goals. You know, we want to increase our average gift, or we want to acquire a bunch of new donors. And we can be really good fundraisers and strategists, but that doesn't mean that we know everything, and that also doesn't mean that we are the only folks who have ideas, right? So it matters to regularly bring in stakeholders from all over your organization and hold brainstorming meetings. Not just folks who are from marketing, not just folks who are from fundraising. You never know where your next best idea will come from. It needs to be a guided brainstorm, so you can say to folks, hey, you know, here are our 4 goals for the year. It is to increase new donors. It is to increase average gifts. What are some ideas that folks have about things we could test? Or what have folks been seeing on their side of the aisle? You know, you might get somebody in from donor relations who says, you know, we have a lot of folks calling in who say that our donation form is really confusing to use and they don't understand what they should be doing. You may not know this. You may not be hearing this feedback. So that would be wonderful to have that person in that brainstorm to be able to hear what their thoughts are and then incorporate that into your plan. Now, I'm not saying that you need to be doing this every other week. I know that we are all really, really busy. We all have a ton going on and are pulled in, you know, a million directions, especially on the nonprofit side. We're always under-resourced. But make time to maybe once a quarter, once a year, have this kind of meeting And very importantly, have an open and supportive environment. You know, if the answer to somebody's suggestion, maybe somebody's new, or maybe somebody again comes from not a fundraising background, if the first thing that they're going to hear from you is, oh, well, we tried that 5 years ago and it didn't work, or, oh, we all know that that really doesn't work for fundraising, then folks are going to be turned off. They're not going to want to share their ideas. And yes, maybe 10 of them are really bad ideas and ones that you know aren't going to work, but maybe one will come through. So creating that supportive and open brainstorming environment is really very important to having conducive brainstorming meetings. On to the next slide. Know what's working. It's not cheating. So I know that on the one hand in our industry, we all want to know what everyone else is doing, right? Because we want to know what's working for them. On the other hand, we say to ourselves, maybe we shouldn't tell everyone what's working, because if it's working for us, folks are going to start copying it. There's a lot of competition for, for names and donors. Everybody is the same. A lot of people are competing for the same donors. So I maybe don't want to tell everybody. But, knowing what's working is not cheating. So do you have somebody at your organization whose job it is, or part of their job, it may not be their entire job, to monitor what's going on in our marketplace, and also to monitor what's going on in the commercial marketplace? Time and time again, what happens on the commercial side, we follow 5 to 10 years later. So wouldn't it be great to know what was working for them? Even if we can't do that today, even if we can't have the most advanced segmentation tools and the best remarketing and retargeting tools, we will one day. Economies of scale will reach us. So let's be ready. Let's understand what that is. Let's think about how we would implement it if we could, so that when it gets here, we're not suddenly running into an emergency situation of, oh my gosh, we have to do this, everyone else is doing it. Also, research, look at what sort of white papers are out there, what sort of reports are out there, understand how the industry is performing. If you have your year-end campaign and you notice that this year your results were kind of flat online, every single year before that online, the year-end campaign grew by 10%, and this year it kind of, fell flat. The first thing your boss or your CEO or your board is going to say is, what happened? Right? If you're on top of the trends, if you're reading things like Giving USA and other indices that are out there, and you see based on those indices that the whole industry is down, well, you'll certainly look at your own results and try to understand what happens year over year. You're going to be more prepared to provide context to those other stakeholders and to understand what's happening to your program in the context of what's happening to the industry. If you do see that the whole industry was up 12% on average, but you were only up by 2%, then hey, this is the time to dig into your program and understand what happened. Did you have a huge file drop off year over year? Did something happen to your donation form? Did you change it without testing it? Was there a lot more competition this year? Did another nonprofit that operates in a very similar space to you suddenly decide to start, very strongly soliciting donations? Being on top of these things, while it may seem like, hey, that's another thing to do in my day, I don't have time for that, can really save you a ton of time in terms of understanding your own results and having to explain them to others. Also, do you benchmark yourself? Do you benchmark yourself to the industry? Do you benchmark yourself to your vertical? For example, if you're a performing arts organization, are you benchmarking yourself to a performing arts organization? Or if you say to yourself, you know what, I don't know where to get that information, or I don't have time to dig through all that information from those in the industry that track it, have you at least established benchmarks for yourself? Apologies, I was about to sneeze. To track yourself against. It can be as simple as saying, for the last 3 years, our year-end campaign grew by an average of 7%. So my benchmark for this year is going to be, did I grow by 7% or not? Or for the past 4 years, we've had an average of 12% of all our overall online fundraising coming from our direct mail URL. Okay, what was it this year? Was it 14%? What changed? Was it 5%? What changed? Having that kind of benchmark that you can track your own performance against can really help you understand how are you actually doing. Because just saying something like, we grew by 5%, Well, is that good or is that bad? Seems like it might be good, but if everyone else is growing at 12%, maybe that's not so great. Having context is really important, and that context comes from tracking the industry and tracking yourself. On slide, the next point is, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I didn't skip a slide. I didn't. Okay, 5 is have an email plus testing plan and schedule. I'm focusing this on email. It doesn't mean that there shouldn't be a similar schedule for your other channels like offline and social media. But the reason that I'm focusing this specifically on email is because this is where we as an industry tend to not do this kind of work. If you are familiar with offline programs, you know that probably a schedule like this gets built 6 to 8 months ahead of a campaign. Not to say that nobody is doing this with email, but too few folks are actually building themselves a planned schedule that says not only what kind of email are we going to send to our audience, but are we going to test something? What is that test going to be? What are we going to be trying to learn with that test? And by the way, what else do we have going on in our email program that might be being seen by our constituents? So that, let's say, your email newsletter and your fundraising email doesn't go out on the same day. Or so that you make sure that you've planned time to send out your email test, see how it does, learn whether the test or the control works better for you, and then mail it to the entire file when you have time. So, if you don't have an email schedule, if you're just kind of winging it as you go along, that's understandable. That's kind of how we all started in this, because frankly, some of these tools weren't available to us in terms of being able to plan emails ahead of time and develop testing in an easy way. But at this point, for organizations that aren't working, in a 2 or 3 man team that does everything, you have one person that does your fundraising, your marketing, your mission. If you have dedicated digital resources, it's really time to build that kind of discipline and to start using these kinds of long-term practices so that you can really evolve and grow your program. Similarly, are you tracking your performance by segment? Understanding how a test did or how a campaign performed isn't just by looking at the sum total of your results. So some examples of metrics that can really influence what the overall result looks like, but if you dig in deeper, can really reveal some different behaviors are, for example, donors versus non-donors. You may have a test that you send to 200,000 people and it may look like they did really, really well, but guess what? When you dig in there, it may turn out that for donors who were only 1/3 of your segment but the most responsive, the test didn't worked really well. But for your non-donors, folks that you want to become donors, the control worked much better. If you don't dig around in the data, you would never know that, and you would keep going with the version of the email, for example, that only worked for donors. Similarly, recent versus lapsed. Are you looking at how folks are responding based on their recency with their interaction of gifts with your organization? Interest groups. This is just an example of puppies versus kittens versus horses. If you just say, hey, I am an animal welfare organization, I'm going to send this really big email, and I'm going to do a test. I'm going to, one email is going to be blue and the other one's going to be red. I'm going to look at my results. Oh, look, blue one. If you maybe dig around, you realize that all the people that you have that like horses really preferred red at a much higher percentage. Not only is that good to know, but that's useful information, because next time that you email the horse people and ask them for money, if you make that email red for them, they will give you more money. You wouldn't know that if you looked at the overall results. So here I wanted to give you an example of how this data can matter and how segmenting the data can matter by showing you just some really quick math on what happens sometimes when you can, if you don't take out donors from major gifts. And in this example, I use $500 as the baseline. So let's say you send out an email, you look at your average gift, in response to that email, it's $137, you're really excited. In this example, we sent out a control and a test. In the first look of the rolled up results, our control had about a $59 average gift, and the test had a $63 average gift. If we didn't dig more into the data, we would think to ourselves, obviously the test won. I should now use the test for all of my emails for how much money I'm going to access. If you remove the 500 plus gifts, and as we know, sometimes we can get one or two gifts at a very high giving amount that can completely skew the result. One $5,000 gift can really change the numbers for you. If we look at the same control and test and we take out those big gifts and look at what it turned out. It turns out that the control actually had a higher average gift. So maybe the result that we initially thought was the winner isn't actually the winner. I'm just giving you guys this as an example of how digging into your segmentation can really make a difference, and how if you don't, you can make some bad calls about what's working for your program and cost it money. Also, setting up testing in a measurable way. So do you have clear testing parameters set up? What I mean by that is unless you're an organization that's testing very advanced, that's using very advanced testing techniques like multivariate testing, you should never be testing more than one variable at a time in your test. So unless you're going to say, I'm going to design a brand new email, it's going to look totally different, it's going to talk totally different, it's going to be an entire package test, and I'm going to send it against my control and just see which one does better, that's fine. But if you're saying, hey, I want to see if I can change the subject line to increase open rate, if I can, put in a different picture to change click-through rate, if I can change the color of my email to, again, change the click-through rate, that's fine. But if you do two of those things at once, you won't know which one worked. Was it the fact that it was a different color, or was it the fact that you had a different subject line? How do you know? You have to control your testing environment so that you can understand what's influencing people's responses. This is a Kimbia graphic right here, but I thought that it was a really good illustration of how to control the test variable and how to then plan for rolling it out and measure the results. So if you have been doing tests, go back and ask yourself, were we doing them this way? Were we testing one thing at a time? Maybe it was longer copy versus shorter copy. It doesn't all have to be, color related. I'm just using that as an easy example. If that was what you were testing, that's fine. But if in addition to short versus long copy, you also completely change the rest of the layout, instead of having a banner photo like you usually would, you put it at the bottom and you totally change your call to action, all those things are going to influence performance. So then you can't really decide if it was short or long form copies that influenced your outcome. The next one is test with a long-term view. To be honest with you, this is the one that I find organizations in the digital space do the least. This is something that's, again, pretty standard practice offline, but something because, again, it wasn't the easiest thing to track and set up. You really have to think about how you're going to set this up for long-term tracking before you even start thinking of what you're going to test. Because you have to keep these people in their own cohort. You have to know who they are. You have to plan that for, say, the 6 months after the test, you are going to give your control group and your test group the same subsequent treatment so that you can really isolate that the initial variable of the test was the only thing that was different. So there's quite a lot of planning legwork that goes into something like this, but it can really make a difference. And here again, I've given you guys a simple example. We sent out a control that got 100 responses, and we made $5,000. We sent out a test that only got 90 responses, and we made $4,500. Just looking at those results, you would say to yourself, hey, the control definitely works better. I made more money. I got more people to respond. Hooray! But then if 6 months later, you go back and do some other math, and you say, of those initial people that I got to give a gift, how many have I been able to give a second gift in 6 months? So what's my retention rate? What was the amount that they gave me during the second gift? So if I look at this overall between day 1 and 6 months from now, what have these donors made for me? What is their long-term value? And as you'll notice in this example, because the test donors, whatever we did with the test made them much more responsive to us in the long term, we kept a lot more of them. So in the long term, even though the initial test only got us 90 responses versus 100, we've made more money from these people. We've kept more of them. And so their value to us is better. Now, that's not always necessarily the goal of the program, right? You might just want volume. You may say, I don't care if these people don't retain well. I just want to build a huge file. That's fine. That, again, depends on those initial goals that you set for yourself. But if your goal is to get valuable donors, folks that are going to stay with you for a long time, folks that are going to become sticky to your organization, folks that maybe are going to be great sustainer prospects, doing this kind of tracking is really important so that you can really understand who you're acquiring in a valuable way. On the next slide, like it or not, if we're going to be fundraising smarter, not harder, we need math. I hated math when I was in high school and college. When I went to work for nonprofits, it was never because I imagined I would have to be using words like statistical significance and levels of confidence and valid response data sets. I had to learn that. A lot of us have had to learn that along the way. But it's very important to understand so that, again, you can understand your data and understand, do you have a valid result? I've had a lot of conversations in my career with folks telling me things like, but I got this result 3 times in a row, and me saying to them, it doesn't matter. It's just a coincidence. You don't have a valid data set. If you only have 5 people that responded to your control and 3 people that responded to your test, and that happened 3 times in a row, that is a coincidence. That is not a replicable result. So I'm not going to go into all the nitty-gritty of math and testing here. I've provided you some great examples and online tools. If you would like more information on this, feel free to reach out to us. But I think the point here is know how to track a setup test in a valid way mathematically, know how to understand your results in a valid way mathematically, know how to then infer those results for your program. So, for example, levels of confidence. You can use math to say, I got a result that shows me that the control performs 12% better than the test. Should I believe that this will happen again and again and again if I roll this out to my entire file? Even if I have a valid data set, how confident can I be that this is going to happen again? There are tools out there that tell you the amount of responses that you need to have, a 95 level of confidence that this will happen again, or how many people you need to email to get enough responses to have a 90% level of confidence that this will happen again. So I know that, seeing words like math and statistics for a lot of us send shivers down our spines, but like it or not, it makes us work a lot smarter and certainly really helps us to understand our own program. So again, I know that this slide is kind of busy and there's a lot of information on here. If you need more information on some of these math tools, or would like time with us to talk about them, feel free to reach out to us. Next, Big Brother, you should be watching. So how do we know what our supporters, donors, and constituents like if we don't ask them and if we don't know anything about them? A lot of us might be thinking, well, I know stuff about my donors, supporters, and constituents. I know how much money they gave me. I know when they gave it to me. Maybe I tracked how I acquired them. Maybe they infer an URL. Maybe I even, tracked the specific links that they linked on when they were on my website before they landed on my donation form. That is all awesome and very useful to know. But there's so much more data that you can learn about your supporters and constituents and donors that can really help impact how you fundraise. There's demographic overlays. There's a ton of info you can get on this. You can find out, people's wealth scores, so that if you're trying to figure out how to, move some people into a moves management program, to find out who in your file has the potential to be a major donor, even if they're not giving you, gifts of $5,000 right now, demographic overlays can tell you a lot of that. Another great example that I like to use of a demographic overlay that a lot of people don't think about is you can find out whether or not somebody has a present or child or grandchild in their family or in their household. Why is that useful, you might ask? Well, for a lot of organizations, that could be very useful. If you fundraise at all around any sort of social services, or frankly, if you are a healthcare organization that in any way impacts children, even if it's something as very big as, say, cancer, there's always childhood cancers, knowing that those folks have a child or grandchild in the household, you can send them a text that focuses on the child-centered aspect of your mission and your program to try to have it relate more to them and to respond. So this is just one example of how you can use those overlays. The demographic overlays are increasingly very, very affordable and provide you a ton of data. Hidden questions on forms. You can, oh, I just noticed there's a spelling error on here. We'll fix that. But you can, for example, without asking people, hey, where did you come from? You can pass over their entry URL, and you can track that in the hidden question and then store that in their constituent record or in their transaction record. So that would be really useful. If you have somebody that, say, clicked on the sustainer radio button of your donation form and then unclicked it, right, then they decided to give a one-time gift. In the hidden question on the form, you can track the fact that they originally clicked the sustainer button and then changed their mind. Hey, guess what? Send them a follow-up Chase Their Sustainer series explaining why that would be really good to do, right? You don't tell them, you don't show them that you're doing that, but you've stored that information and you can now use it to better communicate with your constituents and to provide them better and easier and more targeted opportunities to become a donor to you. The example here on the right-hand side is from Give Local America, which is the largest nationwide crowdfunding day hosted by Kimbia. We had something like over 300,000 donors give to it in one day last year. We overlaid the donor demographics. Again, this is all anonymous. We're not looking up anybody specifically. This is all data that's grouped together to find out a whole bunch of stuff about our donors. And we were frankly surprised. You know, you would think that crowdfunding donors would all be kind of skewed on the younger side. We found out that a ton of them were Gen Xers and Boomers and closely retired. We also found out that the wealth demographic was quite broad. There were a lot of people that had, you know, $200,000 plus household levels of wealth, and others that didn't. A lot of very useful information that all the participating organizations can then take back and start thinking about how they're going to talk to their donors and supporters. Finally, what I have for you is a bonus points question. Does someone at your organization have one or more of the following job description titles, or say a version thereof? A strategist, analyst, data insight, constituent behavior insight. Why do I ask you this? Because again, understanding data and then understanding what to look for in that data. So what matters? Does it really matter if I like blue, or does it not matter that I like blue? And then once you've found those points that really matter, knowing what to then do with them, how to integrate them into a testing program, or how to leverage that learning to maybe build a brand new program that might appeal to your constituents, is something that's learned and evolved and tracked. You can't just, you know, point at somebody and say, hey, you're going to go do that. I mean, you could try, but, you know, I don't know that that would work out very well. So part of this bonus question is asking, are you investing in developing that kind of know-how and resource at your organization or with your vendor partners to make sure that you can build the kind of working smarter, not harder program that we've been discussing here? Again, this doesn't mean you need a full-time analyst and a full-time strategist and a full-time data insight person. We know that at many organizations that's not going to be possible. But you have at least somebody that wears one or two of these hats. And there, you know, I think the cartoon that I have on the slide really illustrates in a funny way really why that's important. Why it's important to know that correlation does not causation make. And that, you know, just because there's two trends that happen to follow each other in no way means that they're related to each other, and more importantly, in no way means that they're actionable. So all these things are really important to understand and to have access to a resource, again, whether it's at your organization or at a vendor or partner organization that can help you understand it. So with that, because we didn't do all the polls because I failed at technology, We're going to wrap up here. I wanted to tell you a little bit about Kimbia. We like to do this at the end because we know that you guys are eager to hear all the content first. We are an online fundraising and crowdfunding platform and a digital services agency. We were founded in Austin, Texas in 2007. We really believe that fundraising solutions should be flexible, easy to use for both yourselves and your supporters and constituents. And they should really be focused on helping your supporters interact with you quickly and easily on any sort of digital environment that they're choosing to interact with you on, whether that's a desktop, a tablet, or a PC. If you'd like to see a demo of all of the great things that we offer, we're going to show you our contact information. We've helped over 19,000 organizations since 2007. And as I've mentioned, again, feel free to contact us. Also, I know that I've shared a lot of information here today. We have a little bit of time for Q&A, and I'm going to see if there's any questions. But also importantly, I did want to call out to you that we will be hosting a follow-up webinar on March 3rd, where we'll be providing specific testing techniques based on your questions. So if you recently did a test and you're like, hey, I don't know if this works, can you take a look at this? Or we're thinking of doing this, what would you say? Feel free to submit that to us, and we'll talk about it on that webinar. We don't have to mention you by name. We don't have to call you out. But while this was a high level, what does Kimbia think are some of the top 10 things we need to talk about, we really want to do a webinar about what are the things that you're thinking about? What are the challenges that you're facing in terms of working smarter, not harder? And how can we go through specific examples for you to use our communal hive mind to help you navigate those obstacles? So stay tuned for more information. You'll be seeing that from us in a little bit about how you can sign up for the webinar, where you can submit your questions, how to get a recording of this webinar. And so we love hearing from you. Here's a great way to also contact us about all sorts of other things that you may want to contact us about. And if anybody has any questions, we have a few minutes. So thank you for those of you that participated in the poll and followed along here. And I'll just hang out for a few minutes and see if we have any questions here. Okay, we have another person saying, we have a question here from Billy. Do you have any other technique suggestions for collecting demographic information? So I didn't mention this, but there's always the survey, right? You can always send a survey to your supporters to say, obviously you're not going to say to them, hey, we want your demographics. But you want to format it in a way that says, we want to learn about you. We want to hear all about what you like and dislike. And while you're asking them those things, there's certainly ways to work in demographic information and questions into that questionnaire. If you've ever taken a survey about anything whatsoever, at the very end, there's usually 2 or 3 questions that say, what's your age, where do you live, what's your household wealth? Folks are used to answering that information. So a way that you could absolutely collect that information is by using that technique. The other thing I would tell you is, if you haven't already taken your offline donors and done a demographic overlay on them that also looks for them online, that's really important to do because you can learn a ton of stuff that you may not know by being able to add somebody's address and their interaction history. Another great way to get some of that information, Billy, is to join a co-op, because in that, a nonprofit fundraising co-op, and there's a ton of them out there. Again, you can reach out to us for some suggestions. But you can learn a lot about your donors based on their behavior with other nonprofits by joining a co-op. Of course, that means that you have to share your donor data with everybody else in the co-op, but it's a great way to get some very fundraising specific information and demographic information about your donors that you may not have access to on your own. We have a question here that asks, do you have any reporting metrics from Give Local America that we can share? Certainly, there's a ton of information on the Kimbia site about Give Local America. It raised, I believe, almost $70 million last year from over 300,000 donors with an average gift of something like $113. So strong average gift, tons of donations. And that grew from about 53 million the year before that, so very strong growth rate. There's some great infographics on how Give Local America performed and what it's all about at Kimbia.com. Also, you can go to givelocalamerika.org to learn more all about it and find out what it is. So on that note, I don't think we have any other questions right now. So thanks again, everybody, again, for joining us. And we'll look forward to hearing your questions once you receive more information from us about our upcoming webinar. So thanks again and have a great day.